Hello, my name is Michelle, and you're listening to Profit is a Choice. On the show today is Scott Beebe. Scott is the founder and head coach of My Business on Purpose, and he's the host of the My Business on Purpose podcast. He loves to liberate small business owners from the chaos of working in their business and helps to get their lives back by assisting them in articulating and implementing intentional vision, mission, values, systems, and processes. Today, we're going to jump into just that. We're going to discuss, I would say, pretty in-depth vision and values, and then we're going to focus in on the process of hiring. And so as you look at all that, think about all that, understand that the foundations of a business really matter. And I know in my coaching practice, when people show up and they have let's say a profit loss statement and they've got a problem at the bottom or the numbers aren't what they want, we have to go all the way back to the foundational principles of the business and figure out where there might be a crack. And that's the same thing that Scott does in his company. And so seriously, I'm just going to encourage you right now, grab a pen and paper, because there are going to be so many great nuggets and actionable items that come out of this conversation today, and I don't want you to miss them. And you know what? You may just have to listen to it more than once, and that's okay. So get ready, and we're going to dive right in with Scott. Every day, empowered entrepreneurs are taking ownership of their company financial health and enjoying the rewards of reduced stress and more creativity. With my background as a financial software developer, owner of multiple businesses in the interior design industry, educator, and speaker, I coach women in the interior design industry to increase their profits, regain ownership of their bottom line, and to have fun again in their business. Welcome to Profit is a Choice. Hey, Scott, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Michelle, thank you so much for not only having me, but putting in the hard work of getting this podcast done. It's a lot of work. And so I'm completely humbled that you would allow me to share this stage with you. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. And you have a podcast of your own, don't you?
I do.
Tell
It's different than yours. So it's called the Business on Purpose podcast. I literally leave a client's conference room. I get in my car. I've got this cool little podcast app on my phone. And I do about 4 to 7 minute segments of exactly what just happened in that room. So it is real-time coaching for heroic small business owners. And it's basically as it's happening, just after I get done with it. So it's a little unique. It's not interview-based like this, but it does provide some ongoing coaching for people who just need those insights on a regular basis.
Oh, I think that's excellent. I'll make sure that I have a link to that in the show notes. So you do understand what it takes to do all these pieces and parts. And, it's funny. I have 2 older sons. They're in their 20s, and they've been making fun of me for the last few years. They're like, what does your mom do? And they're like, she plays on Facebook all day. And
right.
I don't, right? But in their mind, that's their joke to me, because a lot of what we do is digital or electronic or online, and they're constantly walking in. And I've got a couple of Facebook groups that I run for my industry. So I'm in there answering questions, and they're like, yeah, mom just plays on Facebook. Like,
That's all right. They'll learn one day. Let them
right.
get into their 30s, 40s, and 50s, and they'll figure it out.
Oh, they absolutely know, but they just know that every time they say that, I look at them like, oh, I'm going to get you. And so they do it now just to pick on me. But
that's great.
So Scott, tell us a little bit about your business and what you're doing right now.
We wake up every day. I tell people, Michelle, Monday is my favorite day of the week. We literally wake up every day with one ambition, and that is to take these heroic small business owners that we have the distinct honor of being able to influence and liberate them from their chaos. So most of them we find are in some stage of putting out these kind of petty fires, and they're in some stage of chaos. And our aim, our goal, our success, our result is to liberate them from that and really install life into them.
So how do you define a heroic small business as compared to just a small business owner? What makes them heroic?
Well, we use that tag because the definition of a hero is somebody who makes courageous decisions and takes courageous action. And so we, a lot of times, and rightly so, think about military, think about first responders, and of course, that's a no-brainer. A lot of times, though, we don't think about small business owners. and they wake up and they've got to make tough decisions. We just had a business yesterday that they're bleeding money right now. And they had to make the tough decision. It's a courageous decision, but it's a tough one, to let people go and admit to these people that because of their misappropriation of the administrative function of the business, they're going to have to let people go. And because they hired too fast, they're going to have to let people go. It's the right thing to do, but it's a hard thing to do. And frankly, it takes a little bit of courage to do it. So that's why we say that small business owners are heroes to us, and it's our privilege to be able to serve them.
I would agree with you 100% in that. And I would even push back and say, I don't think it takes a little bit of courage. I think it takes a whole lot, right? I mean, certainly it can vary based on the task in front of us. But I shared with you right before we came on air that, my big push in the interior design industry and in the creative industries is for people to understand that they can understand their financials and that they can manage their financials, and that they can have their financials and their company work for them instead of them working for the company. But that feels so overwhelming, like I'm certain, like the client that you just described, having to go in and tell your staff that you've got to provide layoffs. I was telling my son last night at dinner that when I worked corporate, I went through 13 layoffs before I got hit in 10 years. And back in the 80s and 90s, companies used that as a balancing tool, at the end of the year. Oh my gosh, we need to make more money, just lay everybody off. And then they would turn around and start rehiring the next year or hire them back as contractors or consultants. I mean, it was this weird thing, right? But it still is hard to go through it on either side. Either as the one who has to make the very courageous decision to rebalance the company, or the one who's on the other side who's getting hit. So I do believe it takes a lot of courage to start a small business, to manage it, and to manage it well, and to do those hard things. So I love that you use that term. I may just have to start saying we're all heroic.
Steal it.
Our goals to be
all yours.
Anyway, right? Our goals to be heroic. Let me ask you this. So what kind of chaos do you mostly see in businesses? Because you made the comment about wanting to help them remove the chaos. I do similar on my side. What chaos do you see most often?
Yeah, some of the biggest headaches we see, obviously, one that goes unnamed a lot is probably the most pervasive, and that is a lack of clear direction of where the business is going and where they're going. So that's one of the ones that we'll usually have to diagnose, that is a lot of times without symptom. And so they'll come in and say, hey, by the way, there's an illness, a pretty big illness here, even though you feel nothing. Or you might feel a little lack of clarity or unfocus. Well, that's what this is. And so going back, you mentioned a word earlier, vision. We actually put a heavy priority emphasis on vision story. And so it's not just a paragraph of where you're going. It's actually about 3 to 6 pages of detail of writing down the vision in multiple categories: your family, your freedom, your financial position, where you want to be with that, products, services, clients, your team, and the culture that you want to build. So we actually have these heroic small business owners fill out details in each one of those segments so that they can get real clarity on where it is that they're going. So that's one of the biggest headaches. And then I would say one of the other ones is, or two, I would say, and one you're going to obviously dive right in on it, and that's the idea of lack of cash profit. I'm not talking about the net income number. That's irrelevant to your day-to-day. Try to take that into your bank and ask to withdraw that from your bank account, and they'll just laugh at you. And so that's a piece of chaos that a lot of people swim in. And the other one, that probably the most symptomatic, is employees, and having to kind of maneuver and work through the idea of team members, whether they be W-2s or 1099s or whatever. But just having to maneuver through that. So I would say those are probably the big 3.
Okay. It was interesting. I saw a quote yesterday. I'm trying to remember who it was by, but he made the comment to your point about looking at the net income on the profit and loss, that he said only looking at the profit and loss and not really watching the cash and managing the cash flow is like looking at all of the gauges on your car, but never stopping to fill up with gas.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And I was like, yes, it's like watching it and it's bleeding and then not doing anything to stop the bleed or to, put gas back in the car. So I thought that was really interesting, the way that he phrased that. And it made me think of it when you said it. I would tell you that I see the same problems and challenges in our industry. Money cash management's huge because we're doing a lot of product and service work. And so, that definitely is big. But I would say vision as well, simply because a lot of people in our creative industry, they start their business without a full-blown business plan. And so what they do is they start because they have either a passion for something or they have a skill set, and somebody says, hey, that's so great. Can you come do that in my home? Can I pay you for this? And so I started my first business that same way. And so I just started doing it. I didn't even know what it could be. So visioning, I couldn't, it was a struggle for me, if I am honest, because all I wanted to do was try to figure it out. But I will say, when I was working with my business coach about 6 years ago, and she asked me what I wanted, I said to her, you know what? I don't know that I can tell you what I want, but I can tell you what I don't want. And then when I started listing everything I didn't want, it highlighted what I did, right? Because it's usually pretty similar to the opposite. And then I started realizing if I could vision how I wanted to feel. So I have my clients do similar to you, is look at all those categories. It's not just our vision is to have the best product and service in this industry, blah, 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 blah. I want to hear, how do you want to feel? How do you want clients to feel when they interact with you? How do you want your employees to feel, right? That's the culture piece.
Yes.
And really even if we are a business of one, I want to know, like you, when we started, you said, happy Thursday. I said, it's been a great Thursday, right? And I'm like you, I look forward to Monday, but it's because I'm building a business I love, not one I have to do. And that's because I am very clear on my mission and my vision, but I wasn't always there. Were you all, did you have yours like right out of the gate, day one, I've got my clear vision, or did it take you a little time to work it out as well?
So our kind of rule of thumb is that your vision story is never any more than 90 to 95% complete. And so when we started our business, I did start with a vision story, and it was a multi-page detailed vision story. Now, the other question is, does today look like that vision sounded 4 years ago? No. Does it look way different? No. There's still a ton of similarity into what I wrote down, because the subconscious is really bizarre that way when we start to write things down. Michael Gerber said in email, if you don't write it down, you don't own it. Right. And if you want to go way, way back into Jewish antiquity and look at some of the Jewish literature, there's a great phrase that says, write the vision down so those who read it may run. So if you go back way before, kind of wisdom, civilization, and all that kind of stuff, they were writing things down. Why? Because once we write it down, something happens in the subconscious. We begin to kind of head that direction. And so, yes, we started our business with that. Does it look exactly like that? No. But we also review it once monthly, and we tweak it about once a quarter.
Oh, I love that, because it gives you the flexibility. First of all, it gives you the freedom to do the dreaming, right? That visioning forward.
That's right.
But then it gives you the flexibility to shift and change because you know more. I think that was my thing, is I thought when I first started that I had to lay out like this exact vision that I was going to be walking down, right? Like, here's the path, here's the road, here's every detour. And I couldn't do it because I didn't know enough. I just didn't know. But when I started writing down what I did know and what I didn't want, and then what I did want, it starts to kind of open up that realm of creativity where you can write it. I went back and found something that I had written back in 2009 and realized I'd already been doing that same thing for 7 or 8 years, right? Before I even realized, oh, wow, I'm actually already doing that. So that was really just a great, I would say, example of what you've said, is to just start writing.
Yeah, you do. And now the hardest part of that is to set aside the time. It's to actually go into your calendar and go, hey, I'm going to take this 1 hour, follow kind of the Cal Newport deep work mindset, and I'm going to take the phone. And typically when I tell people they got to block time, what it means is I'm going to put this on the calendar, 9 o'clock on a Tuesday. But when I get to 9 o'clock on a Tuesday, somebody's going to invite me for breakfast. And so I'm going to do that instead of sitting down and doing the deep work. But I'd put it on the calendar. Or I'm going to sit down and do it, but I'm going to have my email and my phone in front of me. And so really I'll get about 3 minutes of deep work next to 57 minutes of completely distracted time. And so, no, what we're talking about is sitting down for an hour to 2 hours or 2 or 3 blocks of those kind of things. But distraction free. The phone does not need to follow you on your hip. It can stay out. The email, you don't even just have to minimize it. You can actually close it to where there's no notification. There's no nothing. And starting to get in that free flow so you can write this stuff down. It shouldn't take that long, a couple of blocks of time, and you'll have essentially where you want to go on a document. But you got to start somewhere. If you go to mybusinessonpurpose.com/vision, we actually have our full tutorial and template. You can start there for free. Like, we've done all the work. All you have to do is show up with time and invest that time into it. But you've got to get something on paper where you can start to push towards.
I have started turning off all notifications. I've been doing that for a while. My phone is turned over so that I can't see anything. I don't have the ringer on. I do have to remember to turn it on after work hours if my family wants to get to me. They get on me all the time for that. But I turned everything off. Because it does that dinging, or even just if I don't have it making an auditory kind of sound, just watching the little envelope show up to say that there's new mail is enough to distract me. So when I go into those modes, I have to close it down. And Scott, I've also had to, as part of the ownership of my own company, I've also had to make a promise to myself that when I set a date with myself to work on the business, that I am equally as important to any client that I would set a date with, because I would never not show up to their date. I would never change and go jump on email. I would never ignore them for 57 minutes of the hour. Do you know what I mean? I would never do that to them. And so I have got to love my business enough. And so that when I make that date with myself, that I hold that time just as sacred to serve my business as I would my client.
That's a great mind. Everybody who is listening to this would be very well served to take that philosophy and start embedding it. It's no doubt.
Yeah. And having the time, I calendar everything. If it's on my calendar, I'm going to do it. So let me ask you this. So do you see that if people write it down, do they automatically, because one of the big things for everybody that listens to my podcast, I'm constantly talking ownership. You can change what you own. If you don't own it, you can't change it. Like, I can't go change my neighbor's paint color because I don't own that house. I can change the paint color on my house because I own it. Same thing in the business. I can change a process, a procedure. I can change a money management system. I can change whatever I want because I own it. I can change a mission and a vision because I own it. Do you find, though, that there's this automatic ownership when the clients that you work with start writing this visioning exercise, this story? Do you find that they automatically start on? I mean, I know there's some of it that is just inherent to the process, right? Because you are really kind of pulling it out of yourself and giving it voice, where maybe we have pushed it down and not given it voice. But do you find that ownership comes immediately, or does they have to sit with it a little bit and almost give themselves permission to own it?
What I've found long-term, regardless of the tenure that it takes to kind of own that thing, is they almost become possessive of it. And so when they've got it written out in written form, they become very possessive. And I don't mean that in a negative sense. I mean that in an ownership sense. And that's where I just keep going back to writing things down, whether it be the vision, your mission, what drives you out of bed in the morning. For us, it's to liberate small business owners from chaos. Or your core values, your unique core values, by the way, not integrity or responsibility or all that. We should all have that. If not, then let's just not do business together and we'll go, our separate ways. But I'm talking about what's unique to you that's not unique or that doesn't hold value to somebody else. For instance, one of our unique core values is full implementation. Well, there's some clients we've had to come to and just say, hey, man, it's been a great ride, but this is not within our core value set. Because everything that we're asking you to do, you're just not doing it. And it's really not helping you. And so it doesn't fit within our core values and you're not getting value out of it. So it helps us to make a decision when we lay those things out. So what's unique to you that may not be unique to me? And it doesn't mean that I don't value it or that I think it's wrong is a better way to put it. It's just that it's not really a value of mine as much as it is to you. But we've got to write those things down because that's how we make solid decision and consistent decision every single time.
So I have always been a fan, and I have my vision written out, and I have my company values and mission statement, and I have my why. I love the Simon Sinek why, which actually fits into all of it, right? Regardless of what we call it. I remember when Simon came out with the why, I had already kind of done that work under some of the work I did with Jack Canfield, you know what I mean? Years ago, kind of like you were saying, the wisdom, the Jewish wisdom, and even Mike McCallus will tell you on the Prophet Verse that, you can go back and find like where they were using the abacus and they were doing these things. So some of these things have been around for a very long time, but we hear new words and phrases. But to your point, Scott, I have those things written down and I have a notebook. Now, listen, I am in business by myself. I have a whole cast of subcontractors, but I'm a business of primarily one, okay? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I still have a company binder that has all of that in it that I pull out and read. And when a new opportunity comes my way, I pull it out because it is my litmus test. And I read it and I look at the new opportunity and I say, does it fit who I am, where I'm going, and how I want to get there? Because if it does not align, it's an easy no versus, kind of that struggled no. It's like, I'm like you, I'm going to bless and release this opportunity because it's not mine. And so it does make decision-making and clarity so very real, where we've called it sometimes being in the muddy middle. The muddy middle shrinks when all of these things are defined at the beginning. And I consider these extremely foundational for every business. Would you agree with that? Yeah.
In fact, we call it foundational. We've got 5 cornerstone foundations. Basically, if you think of a building structure has cornerstones and all this. We've got 5 cornerstones: vision, mission statement, unique core value set, team meeting structure, and a hiring process. Every business has to have those embedded and baked in. But that core value set, and this is the real magic of what you're talking about, is when you go to make a decision based on your core values. Now, all of a sudden, it's not you that's made the decision. It's not Michelle Williams. It's the core values of your business that have made that decision. And so it becomes a scapegoat. Now it's not personal. I've sucked the emotion out of it to go, hey, Michelle, did you decide, are you going to do that with me or not? And for you to go, gosh, Scott, I really wanted to do that. Problem is it didn't fit with my core values. So my company's telling me to say no, but I wish it could have worked out. That's totally different than, yeah, Scott, I'm not going to do that. And that's it, And so those core values act as a powerful scapegoat. And we've got clients that are turning down 5- and 6-figure work, particularly in the contractor space, because of their core values. They'll take a contract, they'll run it through the words of those core values. We had a guy turn down a $116,000 excavating pad. They run an excavation business out in Oklahoma. He's actually turned down 3 about that size over the last 12 months, all because of their core values. And one of their values is no regrets. And there's a couple of contractors that they were about to start working with that they feel like they would have regretted working with them had they moved forward. So they X'd out of the contract because of those core values.
That is so very true. I remember even when I was just starting my business, and like I mentioned to you, I kind of started the way many do, in a very creative way. It's funny, the businesses I've started since then, I completely learned, put on my business hat and created a business plan, came into it with more of a vision and mission of what I was doing. But when I first started, I didn't have all that. I was just kind of doing the work. I was E-Myth. I was the baker, right? I was the one baking.
Right.
Versus owning the bakery. And so then I realized all of a sudden, oh snap, I own a bakery. What am I going to do? Right. And so I sat down and wrote it all down. And I'm telling you, it was like this immediate confidence that was built into me. Immediate. Because it wasn't just me thinking something in my head and then having this, maybe 2 to 3-sided conversation all by myself on why I should or shouldn't do it, and being able to look at something in black and white and saying to myself, I really did say that, and I really do believe that. And it gives you the backbone to sometimes, like you said, turn down those opportunities that might be great, but maybe not great for you and maybe not great right now.
Absolutely. No, it's been very freeing, not only for us, but for the people that we have seen install it.
And so you do talk about business freedom to remove the chaos. How do you do that with your clients? What is it that you do? Do you go in and go, let's fire everybody? I know you don't do that. I'm just being facetious. But
that's honestly the first time. Yesterday was probably the first time in a while that I've had to have that conversation with the business.
It's a hard one, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It
Yeah.
is because it's real people. Now, at the same time, I also realize I had Daryl Lyons tell me this one time that, at the moment that somebody is working with you, you are being used as a conduit for their provision. So that's great. That's, it's responsibility we feel and that sort of thing. But the moment that their performance is not aligning with your core values and the vision and the mission of the business, or if the market's not supporting it, there's a variety of different reasons, then you are no longer being used as the conduit for provision, but it's not your responsibility to set up future provision. And that's a real freeing thing
Yes.
to feel that, even though you feel kind of the weight of having to, make those really tough decisions. So yeah, but pragmatically, what we do is we realize that most small business owners, and this is not an offensive statement, it's just a true statement, feel like they're kind of in a business that's a house of cards. Like, please don't come take a look at the inside of my
Yes.
house, because I'm afraid you'll, either knock it over or you'll see that it's kind of a house of cards. And one of the reasons it's a house of cards is because most businesses are started with a product first mentality and not a vision centric mentality. And so what ends up happening is we've got to go back. So we kind of consider ourselves, there's a franchise foundation company called Ramjack. It'll come into your home, particularly big out in the Southwest, and where they have foundation problems in the US. And they'll come into your home and they'll literally kind of jack your home up. They'll get under the surface of the home and kind of restructure it to jack it up. That's what we are. We're the Ramjack of small businesses, where we come in and frankly, you mentioned interior design. For me, I love interior designers, by the way. We've got a whole program devoted to architects and IDs. And so we love that space. We love that world. But as it relates to a small business, I am really very uninterested in, quote, and I'm using air quotes, the interior design of the business,
Right.
Product packaging, marketing statements. Those are very important, by the way. We're just not interested in them because that's not our role. Our role is to come as Ramjack. I'm going to pull the sheetrock away. I'm going to pull the carpet up, and I'm going to get under the crawl space of your small business, because I've got to look at three major substructures. I've got to look at the foundational cornerstones, those 5 things I mentioned earlier. I've got to look at the concrete slab, which are made up of the ingredients of org charts, job roles, hiring, or weekly schedules, tracking dashboards, goal setting worksheets, all that kind of stuff goes into the mixed ingredient of that concrete slab. And then I've got to pull the sheetrock away, because we've got to look at the wall systems of your business. Most have 4: administration, operations, marketing, sales. And so, and some walls are more complex than others. And so we've got to pull back. And typically what we find when we pull back is, instead of studs every 18 inches, these 2x4s every 18 inches, shoot, on the sales wall, they might have 2 2x4s in the whole wall. And we've got to come back and go, no, we need to add some things there. We might go into the operations wall and go, hey, this wall is way overloaded. Yesterday, that client, they had about 15 products they were selling, and they were currently bleeding about 150% a month of incoming revenue. They were bringing in, it's a very, very small business, by the way. They just kind of came to me for some quick advice, but 10 grand a month is what they were bringing in, and they were spending 25. And so immediately, you could just see it. I ended up telling the owner that he was running a nonprofit, and he was the largest charitable donor. But and he got it; it made sense. But also realizing that wall structure is way too complex. We need to dumb that down and bring it down. We'll start to build out systems and processes around that. So that's where we geek out, is really around vision, mission, value, systems, processes, in those 3 major areas.
It was funny that you say that. We had a house right as you come in our neighborhood, and right after our houses were built, we've been in ours 20 years, theirs started to sink. And they literally had to come in, jack up the house, and move them out for a couple of months and rebuild all that foundation. So I've seen that happen a couple of times.
Oh my gosh.
I've literally seen it. And my sons are in commercial construction. So I definitely am aware of what you're saying, just from a very tactical, real life scenario. And it is so true. When people come to me, Scott, they come the same way. Some of them come because they're feeling the pain, or they want to grow and they don't know if they should, or I think I might be growing too quickly. And then there is this protective layer where we don't want to show that soft underbelly, right? We don't really want you to look under. We know you need to, but we don't really want you to.
Yeah.
And so, we have to get through that we have to put the shame aside to go, we're staying where we are if we don't address it, or it's going to get worse. Put it aside. What's done is done. Now let's move forward from here. And then there's got to be that transfer of trust. They've got to trust that we've got their best interests at heart, right? And we've got to have transferred that trust, that no like trust, so that they will allow us to go in. And then they've got to trust the process. Because I've had to let go of a couple of clients that, like you said, they wouldn't fully implement, they wouldn't fully do the work. They kept telling me why things weren't working, but they weren't doing but 2 out of the 10 things that I asked them to do. And so, of course, it's not going to work like that, right? You've got to be committed when you do this kind of thing to go all in. You can't half jack up the house and half fix the foundation. You got to, if you're going to go in there and do it, you got to do it. Otherwise, you just sit back and let it crumble when it crumbles.
Yeah, you're right. Great point.
So part of what you share is when you talk about HR, can we talk about employees and delegating and hiring? Because I'm seeing a lot of that start being kind of a very common conversation in some of the companies that I'm talking to and that I see online. Their businesses are taking off. People are spending a little more money again, and so their interior design businesses are growing, and they're thinking, now, when is it time to hire? How do I hire? Or, they just hire when they're overwhelmed. And I beg them, please don't hire when you're overwhelmed. Hire with the plan. Here's what you should have in a plan. How do you go in and help? Or do you ever see that where people have either just hired as a knee-jerk reaction?
Yeah.
Right? I'm sure you see it. I mean, I know you're going to laugh, but I mean, it happens in every industry. This is not an industry specific.
No, I'm trying to think of a day or a week where we've not had this conversation. There's actually 2 sides of it, 2 pretty stark sides of it. One is the side of preparation and trying to figure out, do I hire? When do I hire? How do I hire? All those sorts of things. And then the actual hiring process, which, by the way, does not end the day you make the offer. In fact, it's may not even be halfway through at that point. And so I'll lay out a couple of things. Number one, this is the principle that overlies all of this discussion on both sides. Everything I'm about to say needs to be written down in a document and reviewed every time a hiring conversation comes up. This is not something that somebody needs to listen to and just go, those are some good concepts. I'm not saying you need to write it down because I'm saying it. I'm saying these are principal things that must be written down and must be revisited on a regular basis. So the preparation stuff, there's a couple of elements we've got to go to first. Number one, we've got to identify the gap. Is there a gap in the business that needs to be filled? Or are you just feeling like, hey, we've got some cash flow, why don't we hire somebody? Wrong idea. Right. So make sure there's an identified gap in the business that needs to be filled. And that gap may be freeing you up as the owner to do some additional owner things. That's fine. That's a gap. But we need to identify the gap. With that, we need to revisit our vision to see, wait a second, the products and services we said we wanted to sell and the team we wanted to grow, does that include this position? If not, we either need to retweak our vision, have an honest conversation with ourselves, or we need to listen to our vision and submit to it and go, you know what, I kind of wanted to hire on a whim, a little bit of emotion, but now that I've looked back at my vision, that doesn't fit what we want to do. And we've gone through that last year in going, wait a second, we don't want to hire that contract coach. We want to do something different because we're going to take our product and service a different way. And so evaluating your vision, evaluating and defining a gap in that. And then from there, you can start to make a decision, but only after you budget it. That's the other item. You got to budget the role. Now, there's one simple little ratio that we encourage people on. It's non-scientific. You can't sue me over this or anything else. But I don't want to invest $1 if it's not going to return 3 or 4 or 10 or 15 or 20. And so there's very sound ancient wisdom around that, a 30, a 60, a 90, or 100-fold increase. There's a great story that's told about there's 3 people who have this currency that's given to them in different measures, and they bring it back. And one guy just put it on a rock and it never came back. But the other 2 were given more because what they were given, they actually went and made something on it. So profitability is, obviously, Michelle, you teach this all the time, but we've got a budget that there is no break even in what we do. We're not running nonprofits, we're running for profits. And that's a great thing. And so we need to budget it. And when you budget, if you're paying somebody $50,000, that $50,000 has to net, not net profit. But if you got it's got to net around 200 grand for the business. And if you've got a business with high cost of goods, like an interior design firm could have, because you buy a lot of materials. So let's say you're doing $1 million of total revenue and your cost of goods is 50%. Well, your real revenue in classic profit first modeling is 500 grand. And so if you're going to hire somebody for $50,000, that $50,000 is going to have to return about $200,000, which brings your real revenue up, if it's a new position, to about $700,000, which means they've either got to generate it or they've got to free you up to go generate that. And so that's what we've got to be thinking about there. So that's on the front side, Michelle. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And it's so interesting. There is in the Bible, there is a parable told about the 30, 60, 90 and burying the talent. So you're right. It shows up in a lot of different places. And I think what I see is interior designers, they get overwhelmed because the amount of detail that goes into their job is overwhelming. It's like construction, right? There are details that have details that have details. And so there is this reaction of, I need an assistant, I need a junior designer, I need something. And I'm not saying that they don't, but they sometimes will hire that position, and then they come back and they'll say to me, oh my gosh, I'm making less money now. And I'm like, well, did you plan for that position to be income generating, to your point? Did you plan for them to be able to do billable work? Did you even give them billable work to do so that they could earn their own keep? And then they go, oh gosh. And so we'll even sit down and I'll say, like, how much are you paying them an hour? Okay, how much can you charge out for them per hour? So if they did 1 hour a week billable, they pretty much would pay for, X amount of time. Yes. Okay. So at 2 hours of billable work, they've paid for their time and they brought you in money. Yes. Okay. So what if they could bill 5 hours a week? And then they go, oh my gosh, that's how that works.
Yeah.
Yes. And they start to see, that, but sometimes they don't even realize that if they are hiring purely a support position, okay, so a non-income generating, 100% non-billable support position, it is, to your point, Scott, that they then can go earn the money to cover that person. So if they're not working more, charging more, having more billable time, it is just going to be a drain on the company. And so really thinking about all of those pieces, I love that too, the gap to be filled. I always say, are you hiring a warm body or are you hiring somebody to do a specific job? Because you need to know what it is you're bringing them in to do. And it really needs to be identified. And is it, to that point, is it a gap that needs to be filled short-term or long-term? Like, is this a short-term issue that's just nipping at your heels? Or is this something that you see being a longer term, this is going to be with me all the time, so I need to solve it. And then being able to really think through should I hire the employee or hire the subcontractor? Kind of like your comment of going back to the mission vision, does this fit?
Yeah, well, that leads to the second major section, and that's the actual hiring process. And once you've got those things laid out, to be able to sit and to go, okay, we're going to go through the recruiting process. We always recommend, by the way, not starting with kind of a general broad look for people, but instead what we want to do is we want to start with our network, and our network basically saying, hey, in our network, we are at a place where we are looking for this kind of skill set. Now notice, we don't start with the title. I'm not looking for a bookkeeper or a salesperson or project manager or whatever. I'm looking for somebody with the capability of receivables, payables, and start walking through those traits. And with those traits, what ends up happening is you've got some real great clarity. So the person on the other end, because if I tell you I'm looking for a bookkeeper, and then I tell somebody else I'm looking for a bookkeeper, we're going to have two different definitions of what that looks like. And so we usually like to start with our network, and then from there go through this long process. And don't cheat this process. Number one, phone discussion. And I won't go into the details of each one of these, but phone discussion. Number two, live interview. And during that live interview, all you're talking about is vision, mission, values, and culture. No job role, no money, nothing. Vision, mission, values, and culture. Because if they don't fit that, save your time and save their time. Then from there, what we want to do is you call them again. This is kind of, I guess, the third stage now, or the third step. Call them. Get them profiled, DISC, Myers-Briggs, Colby, I don't care what you do. Get them profiled so you have an objective measure of their personality, and then run them through a test project. You could do this later if you need to, but for instance, if you're hiring a bookkeeper, have them do an online something to reconcile fake bank accounts or something like that. Get them to do a project. The next stage is the second live interview, and that's where you'll actually have a conversation about the job role. The third is a lunch kind of with the team if you have one or whatever. And if it's virtual, then you obviously don't do a lunch, but you can be pretty informal. And what you're talking about there are everything you've observed through this process so far. And then the next one, if you can do this, is super, super helpful. And that's a spousal dinner where you go out to dinner with the spouse and you just kind of generally talk about things. And then your final meeting, I know it's a lot of meetings. It takes about 2 weeks if it's done right. Your final meeting is the offer. And you can go ahead and say in that fourth meeting or so, hey, kind of this is generally where it's going to come in from a compensation standpoint, things like that. So you can just kind of take this and generally say, but that last meeting is the formal offer. Once you've got that, now what happens is you're not done. Day one. And so now day one comes and you've got the entire onboarding process. And so all of that needs to be present when you're hiring, because if you don't want it to be daunting on the back end, then it's going to have to be daunting on the front end. You're going to get bit either way. Do you want to be in charge of the bite on the front end, or do you want the employee to be in charge of the bite on the back end?
I have on episode 9 with Corey and Anthea Click, for anybody listening to this, they do a very similar process to what Scott just described. So if you want to hear how it works in their staging company, that would be another great podcast to follow up with after this one. But I agree with you. I just had this conversation earlier this week, Scott, with a client of mine who called me, and she'd been looking for a particular fit. And when she called, she was telling me about the skill set that this person had. And I'm listening to her. And we're also talking about a problem employee that she has. And the problem with the employee is not lack of skill set, but the employee, I don't think, has bought into the mission and vision of where the owner of the company is going. And the owner of the company had not really gotten the vision and mission very clearly defined, right? So they had hired for skill set and didn't have this in place. And so now they're running into the situation where they have somebody hired who does not want to fall in line and doesn't want to do what they need to do as far as where the company's going. And so when she called me to say, I've interviewed this other person, what do you think? And I pushed back and I said, you need to go back and talk mission and vision. Don't talk skill set. We'll get to skill set. I want to know, do they support the mission, the vision, and what is their character like? We can, for what you're talking about, we can train skill set, right? But I mean, they've got basic skills, so we can certainly train the rest of that. But I am not willing to help you train somebody who's not in support of where the company's going and the way the company's choosing to get there.
It's great wisdom.
Right? So it's the same thing that you're saying. And it's because all of those steps were not put into place in advance. And it does take intentionality. I think if I would say anything about what this entire podcast says to me, and the discussion that we're having, Scott, is that this is about intentionality and ownership. Owning the mission, owning the vision, owning the forecasting, owning the budget, owning the hiring process, and being very intentional with all of it. So this is not playtime, right? This isn't like, well, I don't like it on Monday, I'll change it on Tuesday. This is being very thoughtful, because people's lives are being impacted both internally and externally. If you have somebody that you're interviewing and you would not let them speak for the company and you would not put them in front of anybody and you don't want them to tell anybody where they work, that should be a red flag. Right? Yeah. And I see people almost kind of taking a deep breath and swallowing hard and like making an offer as if they are forced to. I'm like, you're not. Spread it out. Take a little bit longer, right? What did they say? Hire slowly, fire fast.
Yeah, there's wisdom in the cliche. I mean, there is wisdom in the cliche.
There really is. So I love how you have all of that. But that is a lot of meetings. Do you get a lot of pushback on that? I could see a lot of pushback coming from that.
Oh, of course. Yeah. And in fact, I just got pushback yesterday morning. We've got a construction company here locally. They do about $25 million in annual revenue, and they just went through a pounding headache because a team member just left. And when we walked through the process, we just refined their existing process a little bit. And I'm like, man, this is going to take forever. And I walked through it and I said, let's take your statement and let's find out how long it will take. And so it was 14 days that this process would take. And I said, is it worth it to help stave off the headache that you just went through? Is 14 days worth it? And they're like, yeah, it's a no-brainer. Okay, well, let's do the work. Here's the other side of it though, Michelle. So we're talking about the business owner side of it. The beauty of this is a very human experience, and it's a humane experience. And so what ends up happening, imagine yourself being the person being interviewed. If I walked in and somebody had a non-corporate, I'm not talking about one of these corporate bureaucracy interview things, the checklist with questions that are irrelevant. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, hey, today's day one. We're going to have this conversation around talking about vision, mission, values, and our culture. Then if this goes, then day 3, we're going to send you a disc profile. If that goes forward, then day 5, we're going to meet again and talk about job roles, org charts, process roadmaps, all the structural part of the job. Oh my gosh. I mean, you've heard it before that when you're interviewing somebody, you're selling the company as much as they're trying to sell themselves on you. There's no better sales pitch of the company than to sit down with a processed out hiring map that goes longer than 3 days. If you're doing a 3-day hiring process, you're checking for a pulse based on what you said earlier. You're just checking for pulses at that point. You might as well not hire a nursing company, let them come in, check for pulses, and start hiring everybody. We're not into that. We're into longevity, long-term relationships. And so we want this process to be intentionally slow.
Oh, that makes me so happy. I can remember even all the way back to my college days, and we would go into our senior semester, we would go into kind of like this business area, and they would have different companies in all the different rooms, and we would sign up to be interviewed by the company. And I remember thinking to myself, wait a minute, they're not just interviewing me, I'm interviewing them. Like, do I even want to work with them? Right. Mm-hmm. And I was only 21. So I don't know where I got that idea from. I think I just didn't want to be miserable. And I had already talked to one company that I thought I probably blew the interview. They probably read on my face that I was miserable and did not want to be there. It was just, all I could think of was, I feel like I would have handcuffs on me if I had to work here. And that's not a good feeling. But you're absolutely on point when you say it is them being bought in to the people, the work, the culture, and the mission and the vision. And if you can get everybody aligned in that way before they walk in the door on day 1, oh my goodness, the sailing on the other side is going to be so much smoother than bringing them in and finding out that they don't have the character set, or, so what if you can balance my books and reconcile it? If you're a bear to work with, that's not cool. Or you don't get along with everybody else, or you don't think that we should do profit first. And so you refuse to do it once you get in the door as my bookkeeper. You see what I'm saying? It's like, yes. Oh my gosh, the pain of that. And then the pain of I'm going to have to let you go, or now I can't let you. I mean, it's a mess. And so taking time on the front end is important. And writing out that process and then following it and telling them, I believe it provides a huge amount of comfort to the person that is interviewing, like you stated, because they think this is a company that's got their act together and I'm not their last resort. Yes. They're being intentional. So they want me. They really want me to come work there, and we are really a good fit. And then if you find somebody that by step 3 is like, dude, this is taking too long, immediately they're not aligned with where your company's going. If they don't respect the process, they won't respect the company later. Yeah, you're right. So we've got a mission, we've got a vision, we've got the story, we know who we are, we've got a hiring process. How do we kind of wrap it all up and monitor it to make sure, how often do we keep looking at these things once we've created them to keep the business moving in the direction we want it to move? I think you mentioned that you look at the vision story and the mission and all that monthly. Yeah. How often do we keep looking at all this?
The short answer to this, because it's work. It's not, yes. There's not one little tool or trick, is the team meeting structure. Imagine that's the port, the IV port that goes into the body. So if you go to the hospital, they're going to put an IV port in you. The reason they do that is because they've got to give you fluids, They've got to give you medicine, antibiotics. They've got to give you painkillers. And they don't want to keep stuffing that down your mouth. And so they have a port, one port that takes everything in that one port. Your team meetings are that port. And so communication has to have a hub, and your team meeting acts as a beautiful, beautiful hub for that team member communication. So if that's true, and it is because we've seen it over and over and over again, we've got to have an agenda in that team meeting. It's got to be leader-led, but it's got to be agenda-driven. And then all of these things can be put on the agenda. So for instance, vision can be on the agenda, and right next to it, a little parentheses that say, revisit on the first Tuesday meeting of every month. And so if it's the first Tuesday, you revisit it. Your processes that you've built out. We actually recommend something, and I'm going to have this detailed out in my book, which comes out in March 2019. It'll all be detailed out. Templates, everything will be in the book, and the master process roadmap. We're going to take every process that exists in the business, everyone. This is how we take out the trash. This is how we do payables. This is how we do receivables. This is how we do bank reconciliations, on-site job cleanup, etc. All of that is going to be on one sheet of paper. And so you take all those process names, put them in boxes like an org chart looking setup, and that way you've got one sheet of paper with every single process that exists in the business, and you're in great shape moving forward because it's all hubbed in one place. So start thinking dashboard and think less about just, kind of haphazard, this goes here, this doesn't go there.
That's great. Again, it goes back to looking at, like we talked about, even with driving a car, looking at the dashboard, but then knowing how to fill the tanks, how to do the things behind it to make it work, right?
Right.
So, Scott, that was a great lead in. Tell us about your book.
Yeah, it's called, I've got a buddy, Jesse Cole, who owns the Savannah Bananas. Just look him up and you'll get a big laugh. But
I know him. I met him at...
he's written about in Mike's book.
Yeah, and he actually was one of the speakers at one of the Profit First conventions. And my sons go to school near Savannah, so yes, I know Jesse.
Perfect.
He is hysterical.
He is hysterical. So we'll usually get together about every other month or so and just kind of rap and compare stories and all that. And we were sitting down about 6 months ago, and I said, Jesse, he's got a book called Doing Business Differently, and Find Your Yellow Tux, and he's got this brand. It's amazing. And we sat down, and I said, hey man, I'm really struggling with the title of the book and blah, blah, blah. And he said, well, what are these business owners really dealing with? And I said, well, what they're really dealing with is they're constantly putting out fires. And he said, Scott, whatever anybody is doing, do the opposite. I said, well, Jesse, the opposite of that is let your business burn. He's like, I love it. And I thought about it, and I thought, wait a second, Michelle, every business has thousands of little fires that are burning all over the place. That's the nature of business. The reason that most heroic small business owners are exhausted is because they're trying to put them out. And we need to take an opposite approach to it and go, no. About 80% of those fires, I'm going to let them burn. I'm just going to let them burn.
They'll put themselves out automatically.
Yeah. They'll either run out of oxygen or they'll just be a slow burn and it's not going to bother anything. Mm-hmm. And so that's what the entire book is about. And it's literally what it walks you through step by step. It is my coaching in a binding. That's what it is. And so we've literally taken everything and put it in there.
That is awesome. So when it comes out, you're going to have to come back. We'll talk about it.
We'll do it, Michelle. Invite me back, and I would love to do that.
You got it. I'll put you on the schedule. We'll go ahead and get that done because I love this conversation. I mean, this is what you're doing is what I do all day, every day as well. A little bit differently, of course, but the principles are the same. And I just love how you are encouraging business owners to own their business, because by owning it, like you said, we're able to move with courage and then to be heroic. And how cool would that be for every small business owner to be heroic in their own way, right? And then be able to have the business that supports them, supports their families, supports the world and those that they serve, by their individualized calling. I think that's exactly the heartbeat of my company and yours, just, said in very different ways. But a world like that would be so awesome. Imagine what we could all do to help each other. If we ran the business and didn't feel exhausted at the end of the day, or like the fire got so close that it burned our feet and singed our hair. I mean, that's not cool.
That's good metaphor.
Right? My husband used to, I'll clean it up, but there's a saying in Texas that says, the clean version is put out the fire closest to your boots.
Mm. Yes.
And so, don't stop and try to put out a fire that's 3 miles away. Put out the one that is literally about to catch your whole body on fire.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
sometimes we don't focus on the ones that are close to us because they seem so big and overwhelming and daunting. And we go spend our time putting out that little fire that's a slow burn 6 miles away, that the wind's not even moving in our direction because
Yeah.
it feels tiny and manageable. And so I'm with Jesse. I like the title of the book because we can choose to let some things go and focus on the things that are closest to our boots.
Exactly right.
Well, Scott, as we wrap up, tell us where we can find you online.
Yeah. So 2 places, and they'll actually kind of go to the same in destination to a point. So if you go to mybusinessonpurpose.com/vision, that's where we got that vision tutorial. That's ready to go, baked. If you've got about an hour and a half and you want clarity on where you're going, start there. And it's just our delight to be able to, it's literally the same tutorial, full length template that we walk our clients through. So you're getting that complete for you. And then also, if you go to letyourbusinessburn.com, again, it'll be closer to the end of March, but it'll be up there of 2019. And of course, thereafter, you'll be able to get a copy of that. Buy a couple, send it to your business owner friends so that they can start to work through that. And what I would love to see out of the book is if one business owner grabs it, gives some copies to their friends, and they can actually start a group together and they can start challenging and holding each other accountable through this.
Wouldn't that be amazing? That'll be great. I mentioned to you before we talked, I may very well just have to set up a book club and we might just have to push through some of that. So I think it would be awesome. And then you just have to come in and chat with us.
We would love it. We would love it.
That sounds great. Well, Scott, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for such great insight and actionable suggestions for our business. I know people are probably going to they're either pulling over on the side of the road, getting out a pen, or they're going to go listen to this. This will be one that I get an email that says, I had to listen to that a couple of times. So that's always, to me, a good sign when we've got a podcast that's so detail-oriented, and I appreciate that. And I'm excited to get Let Your Business Burn. So I'm going to highly recommend everybody go out to letyourbusinessburn.com and sign up to get a copy.
That's great. Michelle, thank you so much for being so generous.
You're welcome, Scott. Thanks for your time today, and I look forward to having you back.
All right.
It was such a pleasure speaking with Scott today. I could hear his enthusiasm, and I know you probably could too, for making business owners heroic and courageous. Check out his offerings in the show notes and make sure you sign up to grab a copy of his book, Let Your Business Burn, at letyourbusinessburn.com. And then I want you to head over to scarletthreadconsulting.com. You can check out my latest offering called Correct Your Cash Flow. It's a PDF directed at helping you uncover where the money might not be flowing into the business as quickly as it's flowing out. And then you can also check out, while you're there, the Master Your Profit course if you would like help implementing Profit First in your interior design business. And just remember, as you're choosing to work on your business, profit doesn't happen by accident.